There are words that sound familiar because we've heard them so often, but familiarity doesn't mean understanding, and sometimes it actually becomes a way of avoiding it. And I think this sentence, "the kingdom of God is within you," is one of those words, repeated enough to feel safe, quoted enough to lose its weight, softened enough that we no longer stop and feel how unsettling it actually is. Because if you sit with it long enough, really sit with it, not as a verse, but as a statement directed at your own life, it quietly dismantles almost everything we've been trained to expect from religion, from God, and sometimes even from ourselves. Jesus did not say this to people who were calm or settled or spiritually fulfilled. He said it to people who were tired, who were living under occupation, who were praying for God to arrive loudly and finally and from the outside, to fix what they felt powerless to fix. And when they asked him when the kingdom of God would come, not if, but when, they were asking the same question people still ask today, which is really just another way of saying, how long do we have to wait before something changes? And his answer was not comforting in the way waiting people want comfort, because he didn't give them a future date or a visible sign or a promise that someone else would come in and set things right for them while they watched. He said the kingdom of God does not come in a way that can be observed, which already should have made them uncomfortable, because human beings love things they can point to, control, measure, defend. And then he said that the kingdom is not over there or over here, not in a place you can travel to or build or guard, but within you, which means that whatever they were waiting for had already arrived. And whatever they were hoping God would do from the outside was somehow tied to something that needed to awaken on the inside. That is not an easy thing to hear when your life hurts. Because when life hurts, when you are exhausted, when you are disappointed in yourself or in the world or in God, the last thing you want is to be told that the answer is closer than you thought, that it has something to do with you, not because you want to escape responsibility, but because you are already carrying so much. And the idea that transformation begins inside feels like another burden rather than good news. And yet, Jesus kept saying things like this again and again, in different ways, to different people, as if he was trying to gently but persistently redirect attention from the constant outward scanning, the looking for signs, the dependence on authority, the hope that something external would finally arrive and make sense of everything, and toward a quieter, harder place where no one could perform faith for you and no one could believe on your behalf. The kingdom of God, as Jesus spoke about it, was not a reward waiting at the end of time. And it wasn't a political system dressed up in spiritual language. And it wasn't a religious structure meant to control behavior from the outside, but something more like a way of being alive, a state of alignment, a different orientation of the heart, where love stops being theoretical and starts becoming costly, where forgiveness is no longer an idea, but a choice that burns on the way out, where truth matters even when it costs you comfort. And if that is what the kingdom is, then of course it can't be imposed from the outside. You cannot force someone into awareness. You cannot legislate compassion. You cannot command someone into love. Which is why this teaching was far more dangerous than it sounded, Because if the kingdom of God is within people, then people are no longer dependent on religious intermediaries to access God, and systems built on fear and control lose their grip, and authority shifts from institutions to conscience, from performance to presence, from obedience to awareness. Jesus was not telling people to look inside themselves so they could feel special or powerful or spiritually superior. He was telling them to look inside because that is where responsibility lives. That is where intention is formed. That is where fear disguises itself as righteousness. And that is also where love can be chosen even when nothing external changes. And this is the part that still unsettles people, because within you does not mean comfortable, and it does not mean easy, and it does not mean flattering. It means that the kingdom shows up when you notice your impulse to harden and choose softness instead, when you feel the pull toward bitterness and stay open anyway, when you stop reacting automatically and start responding consciously, when you tell the truth even though a lie would protect your image. None of that is dramatic. None of it looks impressive. And most of it goes completely unseen. But that is exactly the point. The kingdom of God does not announce itself with noise. It arrives quietly, in the moment where something in you shifts, where you realize that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the refusal to be ruled by it. That love is not a feeling you wait for, but a posture you take. That God is not distant and watching, but present and inviting. And once you really hear that, not as an idea, but as a personal implication, it becomes impossible to go back to a faith that only looks outward, because you start to realize that waiting for the world to change before you change is another way of postponing life, and Jesus never seemed interested in postponement. He kept saying the kingdom is near, the kingdom is among you, the kingdom is within you, as if trying to pull people into the present moment where transformation actually happens, not later, not after death, not after perfection, but here, in the ordinary, painful, unfinished reality of being human, which is both terrifying and deeply hopeful, because it means you are not abandoned, not forgotten, not waiting for God to arrive from somewhere else, but already standing in the middle of an invitation you can accept or ignore. And maybe that's why this sentence still feels uncomfortable, even now, because it removes excuses without removing compassion, and it offers responsibility without condemnation. And it suggests that the kingdom of God is not something you find by searching harder, but something you recognize when you finally stop running from the quiet place inside where truth has been waiting patiently all along. If Jesus was right, then the kingdom is not coming. It is already here. And the only question left is whether we are willing to notice it.